Hi, welcome to Lecture 3, Theory and Practice. In today's lecture, I will draw upon our two earlier online lectures that I had shared with you, one on the landscape of Singapore and the other on our critical assumptions, and build as well on our class discussion and a discussion with the practitioners that you have had the opportunity of experiencing so far. And I will ask the question, what is the relationship of theory to the practice of communication? If you remember what we had talked about in the first class, we had discussed this idea of theory being an explanatory framework that offers a roadmap. It gives us direction how to get from point A to point B. For communication, theory offers a strategic framework that guides us toward the kinds of communication solutions we create. In interactive media design, for instance, the kinds of designs you develop relate to the theories that you have at hand and the ways in which these theories connect with real-life problems to offer maps or explanatory frameworks through which design is then developed. So what is theory? We often think about theory as something that is done in the ivory tower, disconnected from the everyday practice. So you might want to say, hey, I want to create an ad, or I want to design an app. Why am I sitting here studying theory? And this short lecture hopefully will give you some insights to consider when you're thinking about communication applications. As a roadmap, a good theory is almost always embedded in practice. Now, what do I mean by that? A good theory is one that is embedded within practical problems of the world, and therefore, in that sense, is connected to those problems in terms of helping us understand them and helping us understand the role of communication as it relates to the problems at hand. In that sense, then, a good theory is always practical. It is always connected to the everyday communication problems we face. So think about a theory about our interpersonal relationships on Facebook. That kind of theory ultimately is connected to a very practical problem, which is how do we relate to each other on Facebook as a medium, or how is Facebook affecting the kinds of relationships we have in our intimate lives. Similarly, think about a problem of designing a public relations campaign for Pepsi using YouTube. In order to do that and do that well, you need to be embedded within theory that helps us explain and understand the ways in which people use Facebook, the ways in which people use YouTube, and how does the usage of YouTube impact how videos are shared, the kinds of comments that are put on these videos, the evaluation of those comments within our social networks, and things like that. So, first, good theory is practical. Second, good theory is relevant in a sense that it connects to the challenges and the problems that we face in our everyday lives and helps us understand these problems better. In that sense, then, a good theory is committed to improving our lives, to making it better, to aspiring toward improving human life through communication and through the practice of communication. Point number 3, good theory is simple. It's not complex. So a theory is as good as it is understandable. When you think about a theoretical framework that has too many complexities that are built into it, it is not so good of a theory because you need to navigate through all this muddle to get to an understanding of the theory. In contrast, a good theory is a theory that you will be able to take a look at and you will be able to understand it, you will be able to imbibe it. And for a practitioner then, a good theory is one that is simple enough to be able to take into practice and to be connected to the development and improvement of communication practice. which brings me to point number 4, which is that good theory is connected to observations, it is connected to data. The everyday observations that we make as social scientists, the everyday observations that we make as human beings, connect to the kinds of theories that we develop, and in that sense, good theory is open to being questioned, being tested on the basis of these observations, and is the sort of theory that goes through progressive cycles of reflection and iteration. And through these processes of reflection, the theory is improved and further improved and further improved. So in that sense, again, we are going back to the data, and through the data we are working through the theory. We are asking what holds, what doesn't hold, and if something doesn't hold, we ought to be willing to put that aside to move further on in our development of understanding of communication processes and phenomena. And finally, when I think about good theory, I also think about the ways in which theory is thought about as a way to imagine a good world. In a sense, a good theory is also connected to this idea of coming up with good practice that ultimately shapes the creation of a better world, a more just world, a fairer world, a world where people have access to resources and where their problems are addressed through participation and communication. Now let's come to the question of practice. If you're wanting to be a practitioner, you heard our practitioners speak. Hopefully, you're not someone that is just doing things by trial and error. In my practice of communication, one of the things that I find is that good practice is something that is continuously improved through learning cycles, that is developed continually through learning cycles, where one is willing to consider the evidence, look at what they have achieved, and be willing to improve on what they have already done, so that there is a learning cycle built in. And for this learning cycle in practice to be built in, it has to be informed by explanatory maps or theoretical frameworks which guide us toward understanding the problem at hand and developing practical solutions with respect to that problem. Also, finally and most importantly, good communication practice is a sort of practice that actively works with questions of ethics toward creating a just, fair, good world. And in that sense, then good practice is also the form of communication practice that is continually connected with questions of truth, that ask questions such as what is truth, what is the nature of truth, and how can we participate in this world in creating the kinds of truth that make this a better place. So in that sense, in that quest for truth, then again, practice has to be connected to theorizing. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you in class. Bye-bye.